Welcome to HealthSpan Digest. In the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to leave you with one action item you can start today to extend your health span. This weekly podcast is dedicated to translating the science of health and longevity into realistic and easy to follow steps. Our topics range from nutrition to exercise to sleep and healthy habits to navigating stress, injuries, and limited time. And here's the disclaimer: this is not medical advice. It's just my observations from a nearly 30-year career in the rehab and fitness industries. And with that, let's get rolling. For joining me. My name is Aaron Shaw, and today we're going to cover an interesting topic: the benefits of creatine supplementation for women. So, whether you are a young adult, middle aged, a senior, whether you're a fitness enthusiast, a competitive athlete, or just looking to improve your overall health, I'm going to pack this episode with as much science based insights as I can. So the question is, if you are a woman, should you be supplementing with creatine? In this episode, I'm going to talk about define what is creatine, how it works. We're going to talk about the benefits of creatine supplementation specifically for women. I'm going to cover the dosing of it, like how much one would take. I'll review the risks, and I will go over a couple of the common questions that I hear about supplementing with creatine. I'll take this moment to ask that you do me a favor, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be totally cool, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I do live Q&A sessions. So I'm planning on doing these live Q&A sessions at least every couple of weeks, and creatine may be a topic. So if you want to be notified when I do these and plan these, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, HealthSpan Digest. But let's start thinking about creatine and what it may do for you. So I want you to imagine a woman in her, let's say, early 50s. Let's call her Lisa. And Lisa is a dedicated runner. She runs several days a week. She does maybe a marathon or two a year. And she's always really prided herself in staying fit and active. Hits the gym on occasion or pretty consistently. But she's noticing that this feels like it takes longer to recover from her efforts. It takes longer to recover from her exercises, takes longer to recover from her workouts and runs. And she's really starting to worry that her bone health, as she moves into her postmenopausal years, is going to become more of a problem. And despite her best efforts with diet, with exercise, with lifestyle, with thinking about health span, she's finding it hard to maintain her overall fitness and performance. Then she goes to her gym, as she does a couple of days a week, and she hears people talking about creatine as a supplement. And probably rightfully so, she's a little bit skeptical because I think, when you think of creatine, it's often bodybuilders or young men, but she does her homework, and the research shows, the science shows that there are some real benefits that creatine can offer women like her, from improving muscle strength to improving recovery. There may even be some cognitive benefits to it, and supporting bone health. So Lisa decides to give it a try. Lisa decides to try supplementing with creatine, and she notices that even within the first few weeks that she feels like she can run a little bit better, a little bit more efficient with her runs, a little bit faster, and she can recover better, which means she can feel good and really kind of get more out of her consecutive workouts that she does. And then what she's really starting to feel is a little bit more confident in her future. She's really thinking that, maybe she's not in this, downward spiral of, middle-aged woman, postmenopausal weakness, bone density issues. And so she actually, by taking this supplement, she's really starting to feel that she's getting a little bit more control of her life and really feeling a little bit more confident that she can maintain her active lifestyle as she ages. And Lisa's story is really a testament to what may be worth thinking about for yourself if you are a woman and you are considering creatine specifically, or even just the concept of exploring what's available that may help you maintain a healthy and active lifestyle. Let's start by talking about, or let's define what creatine is exactly and how it works. Creatine is a natural compound in our muscles that helps us produce energy, and really it's specifically helps us produce high intensity, short duration energy. So this would be activities like lifting weights or sprinting. So if you're, think of like a short distance sprint on a bike or running, but the sprinting or weightlifting, they're short durations of time, high intensity. And the good news is our body produces creatine, which is great, and it's also found in our diet, with primary sources being meat and fish. So what exactly, how does this creatine work? And I want to give an analogy here to think about. And imagine that you are on a road trip and you get your phone, and what you're doing, as most of us do when we're on road trips, multitask with our phone. So imagine that you're using your phone for navigation, using it for maybe listening to some music or a podcast, communicating with friends. And as time goes on, your battery in your phone starts to run low. But you've planned ahead and you have a power bank or a portable battery to recharge it. And what this power bank does for your phone, as your phone is utilized, as your phone is utilizing energy from the battery, you plug it into this power bank and it recharges it. That is, in concept, the same thing that creatine does. It's also called creatine phosphate. But what creatine does is that it replenishes our energy source, just like a battery. So the science, and I'll be brief with this, but the science is that creatine works by replenishing what is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And this ATP it's really like the primary energy carrier in our cells. And so this ATP, we need it. We need it for our, again, these short burst, high intensity movements, activities. But as we use it, this ATP is broken down. You can think of it as your, battery kind of being diminished a little bit. And what happens is this ATP breaks down and converts into something called ADP. I promise the science is almost done. And what this adenosine diphosphate is now, with this broken down component, and think of it as, it's weakened, like as the battery, the red light is on your battery. And what creatine phosphate does, is really it donates a phosphate to this ADP, creating ATP. So it's the equivalent of, science is over, by the way, so that's all I'm going to get into. But what this creatine does is the equivalent of taking your smartphone, which is being used for multiple tasks, batteries going down. Creatine phosphate is like plugging it into that power source, plugging it into your portable battery, your power bank, recharges it so you can keep going. So we need creatine. We have it, we consume it in our diets, and we need it for energy production. And there's a lot of other benefits and a lot of other things that creatine does, which I'll go into in a minute here. But we need it. We have to utilize it. And so the question is, are we getting enough of it? Are you getting enough of it? And what would be the benefits of supplementing it more than what you can get through your diet? But let's briefly talk about types of creatine. If you do a little bit of research, you'll see that there are several types of creatine out there. The most common and well-researched is called creatine monohydrate. And the punchline of this is that it's effective, it's affordable, and of the many other types or several other types of creatine that's out there, this particular type, creatine monohydrate, is the most extensively studied. There are other types, which I'll list off here briefly. Creatine ethyl ester, there's buffered creatine, there's creatine hydrochloride, and creatine nitrate. These will have various claims on different types of benefits, but creatine monohydrate still is the gold standard. And there's even some claims by these other types of creatine that you can find in the market that haven't been thoroughly proven as of right now. So I would say that the gold standard, again, would be the creatine monohydrate, very easy to find, very accessible, and on the scheme of things, the most affordable. What are the benefits of creatine for women? And I think that, first of all, I should be giving a shout out to my wife, who showed me this article many months ago that was specific on creatine, the benefits of creatine supplementation for women. And it got me thinking that it's worth spending a little bit of time with a lot of these topics that I cover in this podcast to make sure that there's when it's appropriate, to divide out what's different for a certain supplement or exercise or activity with the difference between male and female, a man and a woman, how the benefits may be different or the risks may be different. So with that, it got me kind of down this a little bit of a rabbit hole, searching and doing a bunch of research and figuring out what is unique supplementing with creatine specific for women. And so there's obviously a lot of carryover, which would be similar to men, but there's a few things that I think are really worth pointing out that is going to be unique to women. So the question is, how does supplementing with creatine improve performance? So let's think about, we know that creatine fuels or assures that your system or part of your energy system, this ATP, is topped off and ready to go for explosive high intensity movements. So supplementing with creatine increases this, the storage of this. Again, think of it as like that battery. So you have the storage of energy, and this creatine really kind of makes sure your stores in your muscles are topped off. So this helps. Supplementing with creatine helps regenerate ATP more quickly, really allows your body to perform better with high intensity, short duration activities. It increases strength and power. It enhances your ability to perform high intensity workouts and lift heavier weights. And I want to really kind of dig into this concept of women lifting weights, and certainly men as well, but women lifting weights, especially through age and especially through middle age and perimenopausal and postmenopausal women. There are changes that happen to women physiologically that both with bone density and with muscle, and not to mention just our general lifestyle, that we really have to go out of our way to stimulate our body to be as strong as possible, as durable as possible, which ultimately leads to an extended health span. It leads to being independent for a longer period of time throughout our lives. And not only independent, but just being able to engage in life longer. We have to have strength. We have to have physical stamina. In order to do that, we have to go out of our way, away from our typical, almost too comfortable lifestyle, and do things that are physically demanding to our body to make sure that it is adapting to have the strength, the stamina, the balance, the ability to perform high intensity activities. And creatine helps increase strength and power. So it is essential that we have, again, perhaps this creatine would be making sure that we have the fuel necessary to engage in the activity that will give us the benefit of strength. Creatine also helps improve muscle mass. It promotes the growth of muscles, in part because it really allows you to lift heavier weights. It allows you and encourage this, by providing this energy source, it enables you to do more, to have more energy, to pursue and engage in physically challenging things. And the result is improved muscle mass. It's also been shown to enhance recovery. So there's been some studies that show that creatine will reduce the muscle damage, the cell damage, and inflammation after a workout, after doing physically challenging things. There's a natural inflammatory process, and the muscle cells do get damaged, and creatine can help aid in the recovery quicker. So it makes it a little bit faster. So creatine benefits include increased strength and power, improved muscle mass, enhanced recovery, and there's even some cognitive benefits to it, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But let's think about, or I'm passionate enough to think about, endurance athletes. So we've talked about I've sort of set the stage here with Lisa, who runs, but she's in the gym, and that's where the conversation of creatine comes up. And we're talking about increased strength and power and muscle mass. But what about the endurance athletes? What about people who are training for marathons or are primarily, cyclists? Are there benefits? Is it worth taking creatine if you are an endurance athlete or you identify as an endurance athlete? And while certainly creatine is going to be most effective, or you'll perceive probably the biggest response for high intensity, short duration activities, those of us, and I'm an endurance athlete, those of us that are endurance athletes can still benefit from it. So we talked about recovery. So of course, after doing a long run or a long hike or an epic day out in the garden or a long bike ride, recovery is key. And we know what it feels like. Unfortunately, we should probably all know what it feels like to just take what seems like not just a few hours or a day, but sometimes multiple days feeling kind of wiped out from a big epic adventure. Creatine can help shorten that recovery period. Creatine can also increase our glycogen storage. So creatine, supplementing with creatine can enhance your muscle's ability to hold on to glycogen, to store glycogen. And that is also really, a substantial energy source, especially for long duration activities. So it can delay fatigue. And there's even some research that shows that it will reduce the perceived effort with some activities. So even when you're out doing a long ride or a long run or lifting weights, there's a sense of maybe it's decreased perception on how difficult something actually is. So there's a little bit of a, I don't know if I would say this is a psychological benefit or not, but when we're out there, we're working hard and doing things, I would like to have the sense that it's not as hard as it perhaps really is. And especially for those of us, again, that are endurance athletes, we know what it's like to be uncomfortable for extended periods of time if you're really pushing yourself. So I'm all for reduced perception of effort. That sounds great. More benefits for endurance athletes. There is an improvement in performance in high intensity intervals. So if you are, again, with creatine, it is short duration, high intensity. So if you are competing at any level or just pushing yourself at any level, you can think about if you're on a bike and you've got a little bit of a hill, or you're on a run, there's a little bit of a hill, and you're going to give it, a little extra gas. Creatine will help you in that short duration. The way that creatine will work is making sure that the instant that you're burning through some of that energy storage, it's quick to recover, so you can, or quick to recharge that battery, if you will, and it will enable you to climb that hill better. It'll enable you to sprint better. So when we're on an endurance event, which could be 20, 30, 40 minutes, hour, or hours, many of us will have little mini doses of high intensity effort, and the creatine will help fuel that effort better. So supplementing will help with that effort. There's also some research that shows that creatine works with body temperature regulation. So during prolonged exercise and hot conditions, potentially this would help improve endurance when it is, again, what's really hot. And as I'm recording this as of right now, it's a hot summer day. It's going to be 95 plus degrees. So maybe having your creatine stores topped off on a day like this would really help thermoregulate during these hot conditions. But I'd like to take a few minutes here and dive a little bit deeper yet into some even more specific benefits. And I want to talk about cognitive health, the cognitive benefits, bone health, and metabolic health. There is emerging research that shows that creatine may improve memory and reduce mental fatigue. And so this is, benefits for both younger and older women, and is especially noted that during tasks of prolonged mental effort. So not just trying to remember or trying to come up with one particular word for a crossword puzzle, but prolonged mental effort. So we got to remember that our brain uses energy. So any sort of extra energy source that we have that can really stimulate the endurance, if you will, of our thinking energy system is great. Creatine is involved in brain energy homeostasis, so maintaining the adequate levels of ATP in our brain cells. Super important. I want to be able to sprint. You want to be able to sprint. You want to have the capacity to do short, intense exercise, short, intense activity. You want to have muscles, but we also obviously want to have, think of our brain as being a muscle, and we want to make sure that we are fueling our brain so it can perform all these cognitive tasks, and creatine can help support that. For younger women, this creatine supplementing can actually help or may actually help in academic performance and things that require sustained attention or quick recall. Older women, there's always and this is for older women and men, that, there's a concern about cognition declining as we get older. And so creatine supplementation has been shown to help improve cognitive function in some older adults and potentially mitigating some of the age-related declines in memory and cognitive speed. So there are cognitive benefits to creatine supplementation. Now I want to talk about bone health. This is, I think, of very high importance for women, especially postmenopausal women. So creatine supplementation may support bone density. So if you are postmenopausal, should be of at least high curiosity for you. So postmenopausal women are at a greater risk for osteoporosis because of decreased estrogen levels. Once there's osteoporosis, there's weakening of the bone, there's increased risk for fractures, there's increased risk for, and I can't help but think of hip fractures. And I spent my entire career as an occupational therapist, and I've seen countless adults, older adults, really enter the medical system because of an orthopedic problem, because of a hip fracture, for example. That what starts off as you would think is like, there's an X-ray, there's a broken hip, you fix the hip, but it can be a cascade of problems that really changes people's lives dramatically forever. And there's deconditioning that happens. There can be pneumonia that happens. There's additional muscle weakness because an older person that is osteoporotic is not able to do much activity. They probably don't have a whole lot of muscle support system at that point anyhow. And so it's heartbreaking to see a broken bone is sometimes the trigger of really putting somebody out in a major way, and even to the point of taking lives. So bone health is incredibly important for women always, postmenopausal women especially. Creatine needs to be combined with resistance training. So to get back on my soapbox, which I feel like I'm always standing on, you have to do strength training. Please, if you do nothing else, whether you supplement with creatine or not, that's going to be for you to decide. But you have to perform resistance training if you want to live a long life. You have to do consistent resistance training. You have to challenge your muscles, do things that are hard, do things that are physically uncomfortable, that are demanding for your muscles. You have to do this several days per week. There's a million schemes out there and nonsense fads that kind of come and go, but the scientific evidence is indisputable that more physical strength you have, the greater likelihood you're going to live a long, robust life. Again, not just live long, not just have a long lifespan, but you have a long health span where you are physically capable of doing things. But unless you go out of your way to intentionally perform strength training, and maybe with a creatine supplement, which will help with your strength training, help with the results, improve your results of your efforts for strength training, you have to do that to to live the most vibrant life that you can. If you don't, you are at an incredibly high risk. And the reality is you're probably just getting weaker day after day after day after day. So if you can think about, you have two paths to go. Either today you're getting weaker and you're going to be weaker today than you were yesterday, or you do go out of your way to do something that's effortful, that's hard, that's challenging, and you'll be stronger for it. If you kind of wait and see, or you're too busy doing something to really challenge your muscular system, just recognize that you are going to be weaker from it. Your bones are going to be weaker from it. Your muscles are going to be weaker from it. I'll step off the soapbox now, but the key here is bone health is supported by creatine supplementation, but it has to be combined with resistance training. Metabolic health. Moving on to metabolic health. So creatine might aid in glucose metabolism. I think that's still a might. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but it may reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. And I will kind of leave it at that. So that's metabolic health. There's some benefits. But I will say, your metabolic health will be improved if you are strength training on the regular and endurance training consistently. Your metabolic health will love you for that. So it's very important to stay active. Let's move into dosing. Let's move on to the dosing of creatine. How much creatine supplementation should you take? So creatine is typically purchased in powder form, at least from what I normally see, is typically in powder form, a little tiny scooper. And a standard creatine supplement dose is around 3 to 5 milligrams per day. 3 to 5 milligrams per day. If you've never taken creatine before, or assuming you're not taking it right now, it's often suggested that there is a loading phase, which means a 5 to 7 days where you take kind of like extra doses and a higher dose to really, saturate your muscles with creatine to kind of top off that battery pack. So the loading phase would be the equivalent of, to go back to our cell phone with a low battery. The loading phase would be like making sure your battery pack is topped off, and you, before your phone battery dips even past 3/4, you top it off. So that's what this loading phase would do. And so that loading phase is often suggested to be 20 grams of creatine per day for 5 to 7 days, and that's typically divided into 4 separate doses. So now the question should be, can you, I said at the beginning that you can have, that creatine is in our diet. So if you eat meat and fish, there's creatine in that. So can you just be thoughtful about what you consume for diet and really kind of make sure you're topping off these energy stores? Well, for a woman who consumes a balanced diet of moderate meat intake, daily creatine range might be 1 to 2 grams per day, which is still lower than the supplementing dose. And if you are athletic, you may even have higher demands than you may actually need, all the more creatine that you need to perform. But let me list off a couple of high creatine foods. I think number 1 is herring. The second one would be beef, and there's pork and salmon. So those are, maybe the top 4 foods that have high levels of creatine in them already. But I think I looked up and tried to compare, like, how much steak or salmon could you eat to say, like, well, I get all my creatine that I need through my diet, so I don't need a supplement. Well, you would need to consume around 2 pounds of steak or salmon a day, which is a lot. It is a lot. It's really not practical. And that's just with the regular dosing. That's just the daily dosing. The loading phase. So again, that first week, if you were to say, hey, I'm going to top off all my creatine stores, you could either, again, supplement to reach that. If you said, you know what, I'm just going to get my, top off my creatine stores through my diet, you would have to consume between 8 and 10 pounds of steak or salmon during this loading phase a day. So that is crazy, of course. There's unless you're maybe the Liver King guy who eats crazy stuff like that, but generally speaking, very, very impractical. Continue to eat. I mean, if you are a meat eater, great. If you eat fish, great. You'll be getting some creatine through that, but I wouldn't say that even if you, are pretty, carnivorous and eat a lot of meat and fish, there's still plenty of room to supplement, I would say. Now, there's a question about meat eaters versus, the plant-based diet. So meat eaters might get a decent amount of creatine in their diet, but still fall short. Vegetarians and vegans, those that are on plant-based diets, may have very low creatine intake, really kind of making them the prime candidates for supplementing. If you really, really want to see the benefits of creatine levels, being, risen or being topped off, vegetarians and vegans would probably get the most measurable change, because there's a really good chance that this group would have very low creatine to begin with. So supplementing may actually be pretty dramatic for vegetarians or vegans. Are dosing suggestions different between the sexes? The answer is not really. There's the dosing that I went through earlier is, pretty standard, 3 to 5 grams per day for both men and women. And it gets to be really personalized on how you're responding to it, whether you're, male or female. But that range is pretty set. That I couldn't find anything that said, men should have more, women should have less. So it's still within that 3 to 5 grams a day to supplement for both men and women. So shouldn't make much of a difference. But I would like to go over some of the risks of creatine supplementation. There are risks, despite the fact that you may stumble upon a website that'll be selling creatine and say that it's 100%, risk-free, but I would say there isn't anything in this world that's risk-free. So, crack this open a little bit and kind of see what are the risks of supplementing with creatine, or maybe if not risk, maybe what are some of the concerns of supplementing with creatine. First of all, is you could have GI issues. So for some people, they may experience cramping, bloating, diarrhea, nausea, pretty much the same things that anybody could have when you're first starting to supplement with something. You don't know how your body's going to respond to it. So some of the suggestions would be to take creatine with food and maybe spread it out, through smaller doses throughout the day. I can tell you there was a period of time where I consumed creatine. I went through a phase a couple of years ago now, I suppose, when I transitioned out of my really kind of full-time cycling mode and I really wanted to gain some strength, gain some muscle with weightlifting. And so I did use creatine, and I can tell you that it worked. It worked for me. I definitely felt much stronger, gained a little bit of muscle size. And I used it, I put it in a smoothie that I would have most days and mix it up. Couldn't taste it because it was, full of bananas and almond butter and other stuff and whatnot. So, and I never had any GI issues with it. So, that was my personal experience anyhow. There is a concern about weight gain. And this is for a lot of people and certainly a lot of women, it is a very sensitive subject. And definitely we need to acknowledge that what creatine can do, it can cause a little bit of water retention in your muscles. And again, we need water, we need muscles, and we need muscles to perform. But there can be a little bit of weight gain because your body will, going to be storing a little bit more water. So if this is an incredible concern to you, then so there's your, I suppose, consider this your warning. The good news about creatine, if you take it and you start to have a problem with more water retention or something, just stop taking it. It'll resolve, easy as that. But I would really encourage you that if you are on a path, on a mission to be as healthy and active as possible, that for most people that I work with, most people that I see and come in contact with, that if you had, I'm going to make up numbers here, but if you gained 1 or 2 pounds or 3 pounds of weight per the scale, you're standing on the scale and it's like, oh, I'd gained 3 pounds since taking creatine. But if in exchange for that, you had more muscle mass, you're going to be better off for it. And so it's easier for me to say, but I think that if through going through listening to what I'm saying now and maybe some of your own research, if you feel that everything sounds really good until you get to the possible weight gain and you think, okay, forget it, I'm not going to do it, please take pause and reconsider, because the benefits, focus on strength, focus on physical performance, and a couple of pounds one way or the other, unless you are really trying to cut a bunch of weight to, perhaps engage in a competitive athletic event. If you're trying to like lose a bunch of weight or stay really super, like absolutely skinny and light as you possibly can because you are an ultra marathon runner or you're a long distance cyclist or something like that, then I could see there being an argument for, not wanting to gain potential couple pounds, even if it is with muscle. So I could understand that, but please just strength train. That's all I'm saying. Take some creatine if you feel like it's right for you, and strength train. You will live a longer, more vibrant life. But that is a risk or just something to be aware of. There's also been maybe some, I want to call this maybe a debunk, but there's been some things you may read about kidney stress with creatine supplementation. It's been shown that creatine does not cause any sort of kidney damage in healthy individuals. If you had a pre-existing kidney condition, you would want to consult with your healthcare professional, with your physician, before supplementing with creatine. And what some people will do is have regular monitoring of their kidney function for people who have kidney condition and are on creatine for any of these reasons that we've talked about. So please consult with your physician. And really, it's kind of all of my podcast and all the information I share. Like, I'm not prescribing anything to anybody here. So it's just an information dump for you to think about. But certainly, if you have a kidney condition, please consult your physician about that. Another thing to think about is dehydration risk. So the creatine does draw water into the cells, so that you may, maybe a little bit harder initially to find out what your, adequate water intake is. So just make sure you keep up with the, hydration, especially in hot weather. And as a supplement, it's something new, so make sure you are being aware of how supplementing may interact with other medications. Again, talk to your physician about it. And although rare, there may be an allergic reaction to it. So I think that could be said for pretty much anything you consume at all. The symptoms that I've read about is typically like itchy, rashy sort of symptoms, or occasionally difficulty breathing. And I'm sure that if you purchase one, there'll probably be a list of a million other things that would be a potential reaction to it, just like anything else. But be aware of an allergic reaction. Those are the top risks or considerations to think about before supplementing. So let me hit a couple, before we close up here, let me hit a couple common questions that people ask. I think the ones that people have reached out to me when I asked, well, I told a few people that I was going to be making this episode. The top 3 questions were, which I think I hit maybe, is it safe for women that have specific health conditions such as kidney issues or high blood pressure? Again, go back, talk to your physician, please. Can vegetarians and vegans benefit more from creatine supplements compared to meat eaters? Perhaps. There may just be more pronounced benefits from supplementing for a vegetarian or vegan, mainly because the amount of creatine that they have naturally from their diet is probably low. So vegetarians and vegans may actually feel there's more of a benefit, more of a bump from supplementing with creatine. And then side effects. The side effects to be mindful of, maybe some weight gain, bloating, digestive issues. And I think because of those, that the concept of that loading phase with creatine, that first 5 to 7 days where you're really like, you're kind of taking like a mega dose of this stuff, they say that that's optional. I would, if you're in it for the long haul, I'm not so sure that it may be hard for me to really push somebody to take that 5 to 7 day loading phase. If you're in it for the long haul, and especially if you have maybe a history of sensitivities to foods or vitamins or supplements or whatnot, I'm not so sure that there would be, the main value would be hurry up and choke down as much as you can. Maybe it's just playing the long game, take the regular dose. May take an extra week or two for you to really start to feel the performance benefits from creatine supplementation. But my hunch is you would probably decrease the risk of some of these side effects. Just let your body kind of get used to it and see how it responds. So that would be my answer to those common questions. I know there's a whole bunch of information on creatine, kind of a crash course in creatine. So what should you do? So in this episode, as all episodes, I really focus on providing one thing, like what's one thing you can do today that would extend your health span. And health span being the length of time within our lifespan that we are healthy, active, and vibrant, and have physical capacity, emotional capacity, cognitive capacity, and these capacities to really be living life. The one thing I would suggest you do, just consider supplementing with creatine. And I would really kind of even emphasize more so for maybe 2 specific groups. One would be for a athletic focused woman who, of any age, that if you're not taking it now, I would be pretty darn sure that if you're on a thoughtful program for either endurance training or strengthening program, that if you're not taking creatine now, and if you did and you stuck with a structured program, that you would reap very real, measurable physical performance benefits. I feel very confident in saying that. The second group that I would suggest consider would be postmenopausal. If you're postmenopausal, I would really either, again, I'm not here in a position to tell you what you should and shouldn't take, but I would strongly suggest you consider, maybe even do a little bit more research for yourself till you feel comfortable, and consider a 3-month block of supplementing with creatine. We're talking bone density, and please mix it with strength training. If you're not sure how to do strength training, if you're not sure about the right physical things to be doing, please check out my YouTube channel, HealthSpan Digest. Check out my other podcasts. I talk about how to start a strength training program, the do's and don'ts of strength training, and you can also check out my website, links in the show notes here, that I do individual coaching with people. So please, if you're not doing this already, please, a little bit more research if you want on creatine. Consult with your physician if you're not sure, if you have, certainly if you have, kidney issues or other medications, you definitely want to double check with your physician before taking anything. But of all the research I've done, I am an advocate of creatine, to the point, even though now I am splitting my time between strength training and mountain biking and doing a little bit of mountain bike racing here and there. Because of this research, this is the fun part about doing what I do, is I am the guinea pig. And so I just ordered creatine yesterday. So I haven't taken it in a while, but I'm going to start taking it again. So I'm going to, be the lab rat that I am and give it a shot. With that, I am super grateful for your attention. I know that there's a million things going on in your life, and there's thousands of different podcasts you can listen to. So even if you listen to, this is your only if this is the only episode you've heard, super grateful for it. I would ask that you please check out my YouTube channel, where I'm just continually putting information on there, and it's only going to get more robust over time. HealthSpan Digest. Follow me on social media. All the links I'll put in the show notes, and the references, the journal article that I've used for reference some of this stuff, I will put on the YouTube version of this podcast. There's so many that it'd be too many to put on, like what little space I have in the podcast platform for references. So if you want some interesting articles to look at, check out the YouTube channel if you're not already on it, and I will put those article references down below. So to your health, to your health span, I'm grateful for your time. Till next time. Cheers.